There is a moment, and I want you to think about whether you have lived it, where someone says something so plain, so ordinary, that you almost dismiss it. You almost walk away. You almost let it slip through the cracks of a busy mind. And then, hours later, maybe days later, it hits you. It lands somewhere deep in your chest, and you realize that one sentence, one simple idea, has the power to rearrange your entire life. I have been that person standing at the crossroads, broke at 25, full of excuses and empty of discipline, wondering why the world was not cooperating with my dreams. And then a man named Earl Schoaf said something to me that I am going to share with you today. It changed everything. Not because it was complicated. Not because it required a degree or a special set of circumstances. It changed everything because it was true, and truth has a way of cutting right through the noise. If you have ever felt like you were working hard but going nowhere, like you were showing up but not growing, stay with me. And if you want the kind of wisdom that has already moved millions of lives in a better direction, subscribe to this channel right now, because what we do here every single week is exactly this. We go deep into the principles that build extraordinary lives. I was a farm boy from Idaho. I did not grow up with silver spoons or fancy vocabulary or a father who read philosophy at the dinner table. I grew up with hard work and good values, but I also grew up with limited thinking. And here is something I want you to understand before we go any further. Limited thinking is not your fault. It was handed to you by the environment you grew up in, by the voices that surrounded you before you were old enough to choose which voices to listen to, by the television programs and the conversations at the kitchen table and the opinions of people who themselves had never gone anywhere extraordinary. Limited thinking is inherited. But here is the great news, the news that I built my entire life upon. You do not have to keep it. You can trade it in. You can exchange the philosophy that has been keeping you small for a philosophy that will set you free. And that is exactly what the simple advice I want to share with you today is all about. It is about philosophy. Not the kind they teach in universities with thick books and complicated language. No, I mean the practical, working philosophy that guides your daily decisions. The philosophy that decides what time you wake up, what you do with your evenings, how you respond when things go wrong, who you spend your time with, and whether you are moving forward or standing still. Earl Schoaf said to me, and I have repeated this in one form or another for over 40 years of speaking around the world, he said, "Jim, if you want things to get better, you have to get better. If you want things to change, you have to change." That was it. 7 words that rearranged my spine. 7 words that redirected the entire trajectory of my life. And I want to spend the next hour unpacking exactly what those words mean, why they work, and how they have transformed the lives of millions of people who were once just like you and me, ordinary people with big dreams and no clear road. Let me start with something I call the great temptation. The great temptation that most people fall into, and I say most because the numbers are real, the evidence is overwhelming. The great temptation is to wish that things were easier. I fell into it. You may be in it right now. The wish that the economy was better, that your boss was fairer, that your family was more supportive, that the timing was different, that someone would give you a chance. I understand that wish. It comes from a real place of frustration and exhaustion. But here is what I had to learn, and what I want to pass on to you with as much clarity as I can muster. Wishing things were easier makes you weaker. Working to become better makes you stronger. And there is not a single successful person I have ever met, not one, who built their life on the strategy of waiting for circumstances to improve. Every single one of them decided to improve themselves first. Now, let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with this question for a moment. When is the last time you deliberately, intentionally worked on yourself? Not your career, not your bank account, not your body, though those matter, but you. Your mind. Your character. Your habits of thinking. When did you last pick up a book not for entertainment but for education? When did you last sit quietly and examine the quality of your own thoughts? Very soon, I am going to walk you through the specific pillars of self-development that Earl Schoaf passed to me, and they are so practical, so immediately useful, that by the end of this video you will have a different set of tools than you walked in with. So stay close. Let me tell you about a young man I met early in my speaking career. I will call him David. David was 28 years old, intelligent, good-looking, working a decent job at a distribution company, and completely miserable. He came up to me after a seminar, and his question was the same question I have heard 1,000 times in 1,000 cities. "Jim, I am doing everything right. I am showing up on time, I am working hard, I am doing what I am supposed to do. Why is nothing working? And I looked at David, and I said, "Tell me about your library." He looked confused. "My library?" I said, "Your books. What are you reading?" He said, "Well, I don't really have time to read." I nodded, because I recognized that answer. I had given that same answer once. And so I said to him, "David, successful people have libraries. Unsuccessful people have big televisions." Now that is not a judgment, it is an observation. What you feed your mind is what your mind becomes. And if you are feeding it 6 hours of television a day and no books, no seminars, no deliberate learning, then you are essentially choosing to remain exactly where you are. David looked at me for a long moment, and then he said something that I will never forget. He said, "Nobody ever told me that reading could change my life." And that hit me hard. Because the simple truth is, nobody tells us. Nobody sits us down as children and explains the compound interest of knowledge. Nobody teaches us that the books we read at 22 will influence the decisions we make at 35. Nobody shows us the direct line between what goes into your mind and what comes out of your life. And so I want to be that person for you today. I want to draw that line as clearly as I can. Because this is the core of the simple advice that has changed millions of lives. It is not about what happens to you. It is about what you do with what happens to you. And what you do is determined by who you are. And who you are is shaped by what you continually put into your mind and your heart. Now, let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with this question for a moment. When is the last time you deliberately, intentionally worked on yourself? Not your career, not your bank account, not your body, though those matter, but you. Your mind. Your character. Your habits of thinking. When did you last pick up a book not for entertainment but for education? When did you last sit quietly and examine the quality of your own thoughts? Very soon, I'm going to walk you through the specific pillars of self-development that Earl Shoaff passed to me, and they are so practical, so immediately useful, that by the end of this video you will have a different set of tools than you walked in with. So stay close. Let me tell you about a young man I met early in my speaking career. I will call him David. David was 28 years old, intelligent, good-looking, working a decent job at a distribution company, and completely miserable. He came up to me after a seminar, and his question was the same question I have heard 1,000 times in 1,000 cities. "Jim, I am doing everything right. I am showing up on time, I am working hard, I am doing what I am supposed to do. Why is nothing working?" And I looked at David, and I said, "Tell me about your library." He looked confused. "My library?" I said, "Your books. What are you reading?" He said, "Well, I don't really have time to read." I nodded, because I recognized that answer. I had given that same answer once. And so I said to him, "David, successful people have libraries. Unsuccessful people have big televisions." Now that is not a judgment, it is an observation. What you feed your mind is what your mind becomes. And if you are feeding it 6 hours of television a day and no books, no seminars, no deliberate learning, then you are essentially choosing to remain exactly where you are. David looked at me for a long moment, and then he said something that I will never forget. He said, "Nobody ever told me that reading could change my life." And that hit me hard. Because the simple truth is, nobody tells us. Nobody sits us down as children and explains the compound interest of knowledge. Nobody teaches us that the books we read at 22 will influence the decisions we make at 35. Nobody shows us the direct line between what goes into your mind and what comes out of your life. And so I want to be that person for you today. I want to draw that line as clearly as I can. Because this is the core of the simple advice that has changed millions of lives. It is not about what happens to you. It is about what you do with what happens to you. And what you do is determined by who you are. And who you are is shaped by what you continually put into your mind and your heart. Now, I want to break this down into what I consider the 4 great disciplines of personal development, because understanding this advice in the abstract is one thing, but having a concrete framework, having a practical set of actions you can take beginning tomorrow morning, that is where the magic lies. The first discipline is what I call the discipline of awareness. This is the starting point of all change, and most people skip it entirely. They want to get straight to the techniques, the tactics, the morning routines. But you cannot fix what you cannot see. You cannot change what you have not yet identified. Awareness is the ability to stand outside yourself and observe honestly, not with cruelty, not with self-pity, but with clear, direct honesty. To say, here is where I am. Here is the gap between where I am and where I want to be. Here are the habits that are keeping me in place. Here are the thoughts I repeat that are working against me. This kind of honest self-inventory is uncomfortable. I know. I did it at 25, sitting in a small apartment with more month than money, and it felt like looking in a mirror under a very harsh light. But it was the beginning of everything. Because once you see clearly, you can move purposefully. In just a few minutes, I'm going to share with you what I believe is the most powerful daily practice for building awareness, something I did for over 50 years and recommended to every person who ever asked me how to get started. You are not going to want to miss it. Make sure you are subscribed so this kind of wisdom finds you every week. I had a mentor who used to say, most people are sleepwalking through their lives. And I thought about that for a long time. Sleepwalking. Going through the motions. Doing the routine without examining the routine. Spending the years without reviewing the years. Going to the job, coming home, watching the screen, going to sleep, and calling that a life. Now, I am not saying that a quiet, routine life is without value. Family, stability, simple pleasures, these are profound gifts. But there is a difference between a simple life chosen with awareness and a small life created by default. The discipline of awareness asks you to step out of autopilot and into intentionality. To choose your days rather than just endure them. Here is a practical exercise in awareness that I developed early in my career and shared with millions of people over the years. I called it the Journal of Progress. Every evening, not morning, evening, you sit down with a notebook, a simple notebook, nothing fancy, and you write down 3 things. First, what happened today that I can learn from? Not what went wrong. What I can learn from. That distinction matters enormously, because one framing creates victims and the other creates students. Second, did I move closer to my goals today, or further away? Not with judgment, but with honesty. Did my actions today align with the life I say I want? And third, what will I do differently tomorrow? This is not a long exercise. It takes 10, maybe 15 minutes. But over the course of months and years, it builds a level of self-awareness that is absolutely extraordinary. You begin to see patterns. You begin to notice that certain types of days consistently produce better results. You begin to catch yourself making the same mistakes and, gradually, you stop making them. The second discipline is what I have always called the discipline of association. And this is where I want to be very direct with you, because this is one of the most powerful and most underappreciated forces in human development. Jim Rohn's law of association, as some of my students have called it, goes like this. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Now, I have said this so many times over the course of my career that many of you have probably heard it before. But I want to go deeper than the bumper sticker version today, because the implication of that law is both liberating and deeply challenging. It is liberating because it means that you have more control over the direction of your life than you may have realized. If the people around you are cynical, broke, negative, and going nowhere, and if you continue to spend 40-50 hours a week in their company, then no amount of personal effort is going to be enough. The environment is too strong. It is like trying to grow a tropical plant in a frost. The plant might be healthy, the seeds might be good, but the climate will not allow it. Conversely, if you can find a way, even a small way, even a few hours a week, to spend time with people who are growing, people who are positive, people who are disciplined and ambitious and kind, the climate shifts, and things begin to grow that could not grow before. Here is what I know. The quality of your associations is one of the first things that changes when a person begins to transform their life. And very soon I'm going to tell you exactly how I upgraded my associations starting from almost nothing, with no money, no connections, no inside track. Stay with me, because this part of the story might just be the most important thing you hear today. I remember a season of my life when my closest friends were a group of men who spent most of their evenings complaining. Complaining about their bosses, their bills, the government, the price of things, the unfairness of the world. Now, these were not bad men. They were good men. Decent men. But they had adopted a philosophy of blame. And blame is a virus. It spreads. It gets into your thinking without you even noticing. And before long, you are also using your energy to explain why your life is the way it is rather than using that energy to change it. I am not saying you must abandon people you care about, but I am saying that you must be thoughtful, almost scientific, about the influences you allow into your mental space. Whose voice do you listen to? Whose opinions do you give weight to? Who do you call when things get hard? Because those people are shaping your response to life, and your response to life is your life. When I was 25 and my mentor Earl Shove came into my life, one of the first things he said to me was, "Jim, walk away from the 90%. I did not understand at first. He explained, "Walk away from the 90% of people who talk but do not act, who dream but do not plan, who complain but do not change. Not with arrogance, not with judgment, but with purpose." He said, "You can love people and still choose not to spend your most important hours under their influence." That was radical thinking for me. I had been raised to believe that loyalty meant sameness, that being a good person meant staying close to the people in your immediate circle, never pressing beyond that circle, never letting ambition separate you from the familiar. But what I came to understand is that growth is not a betrayal of the people you love. It is the greatest gift you can eventually give them. When you become more, you can give more. When you rise, you pull others up with you. When you develop yourself, you become a better parent, a better friend, a better spouse, a better neighbor. Your development is not selfish. Your development is an act of service. The third discipline is what I call the discipline of design. And this is where we move from philosophy to structure. Because awareness without structure is just daydreaming. Good intentions without a design are just good intentions. Design means sitting down with intentionality and building a picture of the life you are working toward, and then working backward from that picture to identify the specific habits, the specific skills, the specific daily practices that will get you there. I used to ask audiences this question: how many of you have a specific written plan for where you want to be in 5 years? In a room of 500 people, maybe 15 hands would go up. 15 out of 500. That means the other 485 are essentially wandering. They have wishes, sure. They have vague desires. They want to be richer, healthier, more fulfilled. But they have not taken the critical step of translating those wishes into a concrete plan. And without that plan, every day is reactive rather than intentional. Every day, life is happening to you rather than you designing a life that happens on your terms. Now, I want to be careful here because I have seen people take the concept of planning to an extreme that actually becomes another form of procrastination. Planning is not the same as living. At some point, you have to step off the drawing board and into the arena. But the design, the basic architecture of your life, that must be yours. You must decide what you want. You must decide what you are willing to do to get it. And you must write it down, because something extraordinary happens when you commit pen to paper. The thought becomes real. The idea takes on weight. It moves from the cloud of vague hope into the world of possibility. Think about this for a moment. What would your life look like if you spent the next 5 years deliberately? Not accidentally, not by default, but with clear intention, clear habits, clear associations, and clear goals? Most people never ask this question, and that is why most people never change. If you are still with me, you are already in a different category. And if you want to keep building this kind of thinking week after week, subscribe to this channel. That is exactly what we are here for. Let me tell you about the concept of the slight edge. This is something I spoke about for decades before others picked it up and ran with it, and it is the quiet secret behind every story of transformation that I have ever witnessed. The slight edge is the idea that small, consistent actions that seem insignificant in the moment, compound over time into results that seem extraordinary. Do you know what the difference is between a person who reads 10 pages every day and a person who reads none? On day 1, almost nothing. The reader is not noticeably smarter, wiser, or more successful. But in a year, the reader has consumed roughly 12 books. And in 5 years, 60 books. And those 60 books have filled that person's mind with ideas, frameworks, strategies, stories, and perspectives that the non-reader simply does not have. And those ideas influence decisions. And those decisions create results. And those results, over a decade, look like the gap between two entirely different lives. That is the slight edge. The daily reading that seems trivial becomes a library that no money can buy. The daily walk that seems unnecessary becomes a body that carries you joyfully into old age. The daily journaling that seems indulgent becomes a level of self-knowledge that most people never achieve. The consistent investment of small disciplines, done with patience and without drama, builds a life of uncommon quality. That is the simple advice. Not dramatic. Not complicated. Not requiring any special talent or background or head start. Just consistent, intentional, patient effort, applied every single day. Now, the fourth and final discipline, and I consider this perhaps the most important of all, is what I call the discipline of gratitude and reflection. I want to be very honest with you about why this is last on the list, but not least in importance. Our culture teaches us to always be moving forward, always to be hungry, always to be striving. And striving is good. Hunger is good. But if you never pause to appreciate what you have already built, what you have already overcome, what gifts are already sitting in your life waiting to be noticed, then success, when it comes, will feel hollow. I have met wealthy, accomplished, celebrated people who were deeply unhappy. And when I would spend time with them and probe beneath the surface, I would always find the same thing. They had never learned to be grateful. They had grown, but they had never slowed down enough to feel the growth. They were always somewhere else in their minds, always chasing the next level, the next achievement, the next milestone, and they were missing the beauty of the life they were already living. Gratitude is not weakness. Gratitude is not settling. Gratitude is the practice of noticing, and noticing is the foundation of joy. I would often tell my audiences, learn to appreciate what you have while you pursue what you want. Because if you cannot appreciate the small things, you will not be able to truly enjoy the large things. The person who is grateful for a simple meal prepares their heart to be grateful for a feast. The person who appreciates a small apartment trains themselves to be content in a large house. Gratitude scales upward. Ingratitude does not. Here is something I want you to think about tonight. When the world is quiet and you have a moment to yourself, make a list of 10 things you are genuinely grateful for in your life right now. Not the things you wish you had, the things you actually have. And I promise you, if you do this honestly, you will feel something shift. The weight of what you lack will lighten just a little. And from that lighter, freer place, you will make better decisions tomorrow than you would have made under the burden of scarcity. I will be sharing more on this practice, and how it connects to long-term wealth and happiness, in an upcoming video. Make sure you never miss one. Now, I want to come back to David, the young man I told you about earlier. I saw David again about 3 years after that first conversation, at a conference I was speaking at in Dallas. He came up to me in the lobby, and I almost did not recognize him, not because of any dramatic physical change, but because of the quality in his eyes. There was a clarity there, a steadiness. He had become, as I have heard people describe it, someone who has found themselves. He told me that he had gone home after our first conversation and bought 2 books. Just 2. A book on philosophy and a book on business. He had started reading 30 minutes every evening before bed. He had made a list of the 5 people he was spending the most time with and realized that none of them were where he wanted to be, and that he needed to expand his circle, not abandon it. He had started going to industry events, reaching out to people who were doing what he wanted to do, asking questions, offering value, building relationships. 3 years later, he was running his own small distribution company, not rich by any dramatic measure, but growing, engaged, purposeful, and, this is the word he used, alive. "Jim," he said, "I feel alive for the first time." And I said, "David, that is what happens when you take responsibility for your own development." That word, responsibility, is one I want to sit with for a moment, because I think it is perhaps the most misunderstood word in the vocabulary of personal development. Responsibility does not mean blame. It does not mean that everything that went wrong in your life was your fault. You may have had a difficult childhood. You may have faced unfair obstacles. You may have been dealt circumstances that were genuinely unjust. And those things are real, and they matter, and I am not here to minimize them. But responsibility, the ability to respond, means that regardless of what happened in your past, you have the power right now, in this moment, to determine your next step. Responsibility is the flip side of freedom. The more you accept responsibility for your life, the more freedom you gain. Because once you acknowledge that your choices matter, you have given yourself enormous power. Conversely, the more you place the responsibility for your life in the hands of circumstances, luck, or other people, the smaller your world becomes. I spent a season of my life in what I now call the age of excuses. From 20 to 25, I was very good at explaining why my life was not what I wanted it to be. My background, my education, my neighborhood, my limited resources. And I was not wrong about any of those facts. They were all true. But I was wrong about one fundamental thing. I believed those facts were permanent. I believed they were the ceiling of my life rather than the starting point. And that single belief, that the ceiling of my starting conditions was the limit of my potential, was the most expensive belief I ever held. It cost me years. It might have cost me everything, had someone not intervened. Had Earl Schoaf not said, "Jim, you can't change the beginning, but you can change the ending. You cannot change the beginning, but you can change the ending." I want you to hear that one more time and let it settle. You cannot go back and rewrite the first chapter of your story. But every chapter after this one is still blank. And what you write on those pages, the habits you choose, the books you read, the people you surround yourself with, the disciplines you commit to, the gratitude you practice, all of that is entirely in your hands. That is not small. That is enormous. That might be the most important truth you carry with you when you leave this video today. Now let me ask you this, and I genuinely want you to sit with it. What is one belief you are currently holding about yourself or your circumstances that might be limiting you? What is the story you tell yourself about why you are where you are, and is that story serving you or confining you? In a moment, I am going to give you a very specific way to begin rewriting that story. Stay with me, because this is where things get truly practical. I want to talk about what I call the philosophy of the seasons. Because one of the great discomforts of personal development is that results are not immediate. You plant seeds in the spring, and they do not become fruit until autumn. And that gap, that long, sometimes discouraging gap between the planting and the harvest, is where most people give up. They plant for a week, then they look at the ground and see nothing, and they conclude that the seeds were bad or the soil was wrong or the method was flawed. But the seeds were fine. The soil was good. The method was sound. The problem was impatience. The problem was expecting autumn's harvest in the middle of spring. Nature does not negotiate with impatience. The laws of growth are patient and consistent, and they reward the farmer who understands them and works with them. In the spring of your development, and that spring might be right now, reading this, listening to these ideas for the first time, your job is simply to plant. Read the books. Change the associations. Build the habits. Design the plan. Practice the gratitude. Do the work. You may not see results for weeks or months or even years. But the seeds are going in. The roots are forming below the surface, where you cannot see them. And one day, and I have seen this happen so many times that I can say it with absolute certainty, one day it will look from the outside like an overnight success. People will marvel at how quickly things changed for you. They will look at your results and say, "How did you do that so fast?" And you will know that it was not fast. It was years of spring planting, patient and consistent, that nobody saw. And you will smile, because you will understand something about the laws of growth that most people never figure out. I want to share something personal with you now. Something about my own spring planting, because I think it will help you understand why I talk about these principles with such conviction. When I first met Earl Schoaf, I was 25 years old and working as a stock clerk. I was making barely enough to cover my rent. My wife and I had a child, another on the way, and I remember lying awake at night not with ambition but with dread. The fear that I was going to end up like the cautionary tales I had grown up watching. Good men, decent men, who worked hard their whole lives and still ended up with very little to show for it at the end. I was afraid of that fate. And fear, while it is a terrible master, can occasionally be a useful motivator if you channel it correctly. I channeled mine into action. Earl took me under his wing and introduced me to a simple idea that I have since passed on to millions. Success is not something you pursue. Success is something you attract, by the person you become. That sentence rewired my thinking. Because it moved success from the external world, from luck, timing, connections, background, into the internal world. It made success a function of character and habit rather than circumstance and chance. And if success is attracted by the person you become, then the most important work I could possibly do was not on my career or my finances or my social status, it was on myself, on my mindset, on my habits, on the quality of my thinking, on the disciplines I practiced every day in private. And so that is what I did. I started reading. I started studying. I started attending seminars and asking questions and seeking out people who were doing what I wanted to do. I started keeping a journal. I started evaluating the associations in my life with an honest eye. I started setting goals, specific, written, reviewed regularly. I started practicing gratitude every single day. None of these things cost money. None of them required a special opportunity. They required only one thing, a decision. A decision to become someone different from who I had been. A decision to invest in myself. A decision to take my development seriously. That decision, made at 25, in a small apartment with a child and another on the way, became the foundation of a life that eventually allowed me to speak in more than 100 countries, to write books that have been read by millions, to build friendships with some of the most extraordinary people of the 20th century. Not because I was special, but because I made that decision. And I made it again every morning. And you can make it too. Right now. Today. The advice is simple. The application is consistent. The results are extraordinary. If you have been watching this video and feeling something stir inside you, that quiet voice that says, "Yes, this is what I need," then I want you to do one thing before you close this window. Subscribe to this channel. Because this work does not end here. Every week, we go deeper. Every week, we take another layer off these principles and get more specific, more practical, more useful. Subscribe so that the next time we sit together like this, you are a little further along the road than you are today. Let me spend a few moments now on something that I believe is the bridge between philosophy and practice. I call it the Daily 5. These are 5 habits, small, consistent, entirely within your control, that I recommend to anyone who wants to begin the journey of personal development but does not know where to start. I have refined these over decades of coaching and teaching, and while they are not the only habits that matter, they are the ones I have seen create the most consistent, most reliable results for the widest variety of people. The first of the Daily 5 is reading. Not scrolling. Not passive consumption. Active, deliberate reading, at least 10 to 20 pages of a worthwhile book every single day. If you do this consistently, you will read roughly a dozen books in a year. And the right 12 books in the right year can change the entire direction of your life. I have a simple rule for book selection. Whenever possible, read biographies and autobiographies of people who have done what you want to do. Because there is no more efficient shortcut to wisdom than studying the actual choices, mistakes, and principles of people who have already navigated the terrain you are entering. The second daily habit is reflection. 5 to 10 minutes, once a day, of quiet sitting and thinking. Not meditation in any formal sense, though that has its place, but honest thinking. About the direction your life is taking. About whether your actions today aligned with your values and goals. About what is working and what is not. Most people are so busy doing that they never take time to think. And the great irony is that taking time to think consistently saves enormous amounts of time in the long run, because you stop spending years running hard in the wrong direction. The third daily habit is exercise. Now, I know this might seem out of place in a conversation about philosophy and wisdom. But here is what I have learned from a lifetime of studying human performance. The body and the mind are not separate systems. They are one system. And when the body is neglected, when you are sedentary and tired and physically dull, the mind follows. Energy is the platform on which everything else is built. Without adequate physical energy, the reading becomes difficult, the reflection becomes foggy, the discipline becomes nearly impossible. Exercise is not vanity. It is not optional. It is the maintenance of the engine that powers everything else. And very soon, in just a moment, I will share with you the 4th and 5th of the Daily 5. But I want to pause here and say something directly to those of you who are watching this and thinking, "This all sounds good, Jim, but I am too busy." Because I hear that more than almost anything else. And I want to address it as honestly as I can. Keep reading. You are not too busy. I know that sounds harsh, and I say it with compassion. But the truth is, the things I am describing, 10 pages of reading, 10 minutes of reflection, 20 minutes of movement, take less than an hour combined. Every human being on earth has 1 hour in their day that they could redirect, if they chose to. 1 hour that is currently going to the television or the social media feed or the long commute spent on nothing in particular. I am not asking you to add an hour to a day that is already full to breaking. I am asking you to redirect 1 hour that is already there, already yours, already passing, towards something that compounds over time into the life you say you want. The choice, as always, is yours. The fourth daily habit is service. Giving something, your time, your knowledge, your encouragement, your generosity, to someone else every single day. Not in a grand, performative way. In small, quiet, genuine ways. Helping a colleague think through a problem. Calling someone who is struggling. Sharing an idea that might help someone you know. Writing an encouraging note. Expressing genuine gratitude to someone who has influenced your life. Service, practiced daily, does something profound to the character. It breaks the cycle of self-absorption that is the enemy of growth. It builds relationships that become the foundation of opportunity. And it creates a sense of meaning and contribution that no amount of personal achievement can match. I have met very few genuinely happy people who were not also genuinely generous people. The correlation is not coincidental. The fifth and final daily habit is what I call the habit of design, which means spending at least a few minutes every single day looking at your goals and your plans. Not obsessing. Not anxious re-examination. Just a quiet, regular review of where you are going and why. Reading your goals in the morning is like setting the GPS at the beginning of a journey. It orients your subconscious mind toward the destination and influences, in ways both subtle and profound, the decisions you make throughout the day. Goals that are written down and reviewed regularly are not mere wishes. They become navigation systems. They become the quiet voice in the background that says, this opportunity aligns with where you are going, or this distraction will take you off course. Without that voice, you are navigating without a map. With it, even complicated terrain becomes traversable. I want to tell you about a woman I met at a seminar in Chicago sometime in the late 1970s. She was perhaps 35 years old, a schoolteacher, single mother of 2. She had come to the seminar on the recommendation of a friend, a little skeptical, a little tired, carrying the quiet exhaustion of someone who had been doing everything alone for a long time. She came up to me afterward and said, "Mr. Rohn, all of this sounds wonderful, but my life doesn't look like the lives of the people you describe in your stories. I don't have resources. I don't have connections. I don't have time." I looked at her for a moment, and I said, "What you have is something more valuable than all of those things. You have a reason." She looked puzzled. I said, "Your children. You have 2 small people whose lives will be shaped, more than anything else, by the person you decide to become. That is not a burden. That is a reason. And a strong enough reason can do more for a person than any resource or connection in the world." She came to many more of my seminars over the years. I watched her transform. Not overnight. Not without difficulty. But with the quiet consistency of someone who had found a reason strong enough to sustain the effort. By the time her children were in high school, she had become an assistant principal. By the time they were in college, she had written a small book, published locally, on teaching methods that eventually reached classrooms in 3 states. She was not wealthy by any conventional measure. But she was extraordinary. She had become, over the years, someone whose presence changed the rooms she walked into. Someone whose life was a lesson in what is possible when you commit to your own development. And here is what I want you to take from her story. The circumstances do not have to be ideal. The resources do not have to be sufficient. The timing does not have to be perfect. What has to be present is the decision. The clear, firm, daily renewed decision that you are going to grow. That you are going to become more. That you are going to take whatever is in your hands, however little it may seem right now, and invest it wisely in the only asset that no market crash can take away, no recession can diminish, and no other person can steal, yourself. I want to ask you one more time, and I ask it because I genuinely mean it, not as a formality. If what you are hearing today is resonating with you, if you are feeling that quiet shift of recognition that says, "This is the kind of thinking I need more of," then subscribe to this channel right now. Because we have barely scratched the surface. The depths of these principles, applied to relationships, to financial life, to health, to purpose and meaning, are inexhaustible. And we explore all of them, week after week, with the same seriousness and the same care that you have experienced today. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Jim, 5 disciplines? Reading, reflection, exercise, service, design? That is a lot to take on. I am already overwhelmed. And I understand that feeling. I truly do. When I was 25, the idea of adding 5 new things to my day would have seemed impossible. But here is the secret to getting started, the secret that Earl Shoaff shared with me and that has helped millions of people break through the paralysis of overwhelm. Start small. Start ridiculous. Start so small that it feels almost silly to even bother. If you cannot read 10 pages, read 1. If you cannot reflect for 10 minutes, reflect for 1. If you cannot exercise for 20 minutes, walk around the block once. If you cannot serve someone today, just smile at the cashier and say thank you with genuine warmth. If you cannot design your next 5 years, design your next hour. The goal in the beginning is not to achieve the result. The goal is to build the habit. The goal is to prove to yourself that you are the kind of person who makes a commitment and keeps it. Once the habit is there, once you are consistent, then you can expand it. But you cannot expand what you do not have. So start where you are, with what you have, and make the first step so easy that you cannot possibly fail. The momentum from that one tiny, kept promise to yourself will fuel the next step, and the next, until one day you look back and realize you are running a distance you once thought was impossible. I have spent my life speaking to millions of people in hundreds of countries, and I have found that despite all our differences in language and culture and background, we all essentially want the same things. We want to feel like our lives matter. We want to provide for our families. We want to grow and achieve. We want to be healthy and happy. The challenge is not that we want different things. The challenge is that we have been taught to chase the results rather than to cultivate the causes. We chase money, but money is a result of providing value. We chase happiness, but happiness is a result of growth and contribution. We chase health, but health is a result of disciplines of nutrition and movement. The profound advice I want you to remember, the advice that has guided every successful life I have ever studied, is to stop focusing on the fruit and start focusing on the tree. Stop obsessing over what you want to get and start obsessing over who you need to become. If you become the right person, the results will come to you, as surely as the dawn follows the night. This shift in focus from the external to the internal is the single most important shift you can ever make. It is the beginning of wisdom, the foundation of character, and the only reliable path to a life of extraordinary impact and fulfillment. And this is not a message for some distant future. This is a message for right now. For the decisions you make in the next hour, for the person you choose to be when you close this video. The life you want is not somewhere else. It is right here, waiting for you to decide to become the person who is capable of living it. And this leads me to another foundational principle, something I call the law of diminishing intent. We all feel it. We listen to a powerful message, we attend a seminar, we read an inspiring book, and in that moment, we are filled with resolve. We say, yes, I am going to change. I am going to start that habit. I am going to make that call. The intention is high. But if you do not act on that intention quickly, if you do not take some concrete, visible action within a short period of time, the intention begins to diminish. The excuses start to creep in. The routine of your old life begins to reassert itself. By the next day, the resolve is weaker. By the end of the week, it is often gone entirely. The window of opportunity to turn inspiration into action is very, very small. And that is why I urge you, if you are feeling a shift, if you are feeling a sense of commitment, do something right now. Do not wait until tomorrow. Do not wait until you have the perfect plan. Pick up a book. Open a notebook. Make a call. Send an email. Take a 5-minute walk. Do something that makes your intention real. This first, immediate action is the only thing that can protect your inspiration from the slow erosion of procrastination. The life you want is built in the tiny moments between feeling inspired and taking action. Do not let those moments slip by. Act on your resolve while the feeling is strong and the intent is high. I often think about the word ordinary and how we use it to describe ourselves. We say, "Oh, I am just an ordinary person." As if being ordinary were a limitation, a barrier to something greater. But when you look at the stories of people who have built extraordinary lives, what you always find is that they started as ordinary people. They were not born with superpowers. They did not have special connections or an internal map to success. They had ordinary fears and ordinary doubts and ordinary circumstances. What made them extraordinary was not what they were given, but what they chose to do with what they were given. They chose to practice ordinary disciplines with extraordinary consistency. They chose to seek out ordinary knowledge with extraordinary curiosity. They chose to face ordinary obstacles with extraordinary persistence. They chose to practice ordinary gratitude with extraordinary awareness. The extraordinary life is not a result of some magical formula. It is the natural, inevitable outcome of an ordinary person committing themselves, deeply and consistently, to the principles of personal growth and self-development. And if you are still with me, still listening, then you are already demonstrating an extraordinary capacity for sustained focus and a genuine hunger for wisdom. You are already further along the path than you think. Now, the challenge is simply to stay on it. Day after day. Discipline after discipline. Moment after moment. Building the extraordinary from the raw materials of the ordinary. Let me talk for a few moments about what I call the ultimate value, the value of time. We spend so much energy worrying about our money, how much we have, how we can get more, how we can protect it. But the one asset that is genuinely finite, the one resource that we can never get back once it is spent, is time. You can always make more money. You can always build another business. You can always acquire new assets. But you can never, ever get back another hour. And yet, how casually we spend it. We throw it away on activities that bring us no joy, no growth, no connection. We let others steal it. We waste it on worry and regret. I have always thought that if we valued our time the way we valued our money, the world would look like a completely different place. A person who values their time will not waste a year. A person who values their time will not waste a month. A person who values their time will not waste a day. They will treat each day as a precious, non-renewable resource, to be invested, not just spent. And how do you invest time? By putting it into the things that grow over time: your knowledge, your relationships, your character, your health, your service. These are the assets that pay dividends, not just today, but for decades to come. When you become a person who values their time, you become a person who can build an extraordinary life, because you are no longer willing to settle for less than the full, remarkable potential of every single day. When I think back on the span of my career, the books written, the seminars given, the miles traveled, I am often asked what I consider to be the most important lesson, the one insight that I hope people will remember long after I am gone. And I always come back to the same simple truth. The simple truth that Earl Shove passed to me. The simple truth that you have the power to change your life, beginning right now, by changing yourself. It sounds almost too simple to be profound, doesn't it? It sounds like something from a bumper sticker or a cheesy greeting card. But when you really understand what it means, when you look past the simplicity and see the revolutionary idea that it contains, it is the most liberating, empowering truth you can ever know. It means that you are not a victim of your circumstances. You are not trapped by your past. You are not defined by what others think of you. You are the architect of your own character, the designer of your own future, and the owner of your own life. This is not a philosophy for the faint of heart. It demands courage and honesty and a willingness to accept full responsibility for your results. But it is also a philosophy that promises freedom and mastery and a life of uncommon quality for anyone who is willing to do the work. The choice is yours. The time is now. The road is open. I urge you to step onto it with hope and conviction and a commitment to becoming the most extraordinary person you are capable of being. As we bring this conversation to a close, I want to address one final idea, something that I believe is the invisible framework upon which everything else is built. I call it the idea of professional curiosity. In every field, in every discipline, there are those who are content to know the techniques, the formulas, the basics. And then there are those who possess professional curiosity. These are the people who are not content with what. They want to know why. They do not just want to learn a skill, they want to understand the principle beneath the skill. They do not just want to solve a problem, they want to understand the structure that created the problem. This kind of deep, persistent, penetrating curiosity is the hallmark of mastery. It is what separates the practitioner from the professional. And I want to urge you, in your own life and your own pursuit of development, to cultivate this same kind of curiosity. Do not just read the words, study the meaning. Do not just practice the habit, understand the benefit. Do not just set the goal, understand the person you must become to achieve it. This deep engagement with the principles of growth is what turns a series of actions into a transformative journey. It is what elevates your development from a chore to a passion. And it is what ensures that the changes you make are not temporary fixes, but permanent shifts in your character and your philosophy. Stay curious. Stay open. Keep asking why. The answers you find will not just change your understanding, they will change your life. So, here is the conclusion of the whole matter. This simple advice, these 7 words that rearranged my spine: if you want things to change, you have to change. They are not just a catchy phrase. They are the open door to a life you cannot yet fully imagine. But a door is useless if you do not walk through it. A philosophy is powerless if it does not lead to action. The ideas we have shared today, the disciplines of awareness, association, design, gratitude, and consistency, the understanding of value, time, responsibility, and professional curiosity, these are not just interesting concepts to be discussed. They are practical tools to be used. They are the seeds of your future, waiting for you to plant them in the fertile soil of your daily actions. I have given you the roadmap, as it was given to me by my mentor. I have drawn the lines as clearly as I can. Now, the journey is yours to take. It will not always be easy. It will require patience and discipline and a willingness to face the uncomfortable truths that awareness reveals. But I can promise you, from the perspective of a life that was transformed by these very principles, that it will be worth it. The person you will become, the lives you will touch, the legacy you will build, these are the true measures of an extraordinary life. And they are all well within your grasp, beginning today. Walk away from the 90%. Walk away from the excuses and the blame and the limited thinking. Step onto the path of personal development with conviction and courage. Start reading the books. Start designing the plan. Start practicing the disciplines. Start becoming the person you were meant to be. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and the journey to an extraordinary life begins with a single decision. Make that decision now. Subscribe to this channel, stay on the road, and let us see just how far you can go. It is time to get started.